My name is Naomi Carter. I am 31 years old, and I work as a senior life cycle marketing manager in Northern Virginia. I live alone. I plan everything carefully, and for most of my adult life, I was the person my family called whenever something went wrong: a bill they forgot, a favor they needed, a mess they expected somebody else to clean up. So when my mother called me a week before Christmas, sounding soft and almost tearful, begging me to come home because the holidays would not feel complete without me, I let myself believe her. I booked the flight, rearranged work, packed gifts, and spent 6 exhausting hours crossing the country thinking maybe this year would be different. By the time I reached the house, my legs were sore, my coat was damp from the Colorado snow, and my suitcase wheels were packed with slush. I barely made it to the front step before the door opened and my father looked at me like I was late for a shift. He did not say welcome home. He did not ask about my flight. He just stared at me and said that if I was not there to babysit my sister's kids so they could leave for their holiday trip, then I did not need to come inside at all. A second later, my sister appeared behind him, already dressed to leave, laughing like this was the most natural thing in the world. Then my mother joined in, then the kids, then all of them were smiling at me like I was not their daughter or sister. Just the unpaid solution standing on the porch with a suitcase in one hand. I looked at every face in that doorway, smiled back, and told them they had 5 more minutes to laugh together. Before I tell you why the whole house went quiet right after that, tell me this first: what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? Because I really want to know how far this story reaches tonight. Nobody laughed after I said that. My father's smile dropped first, then my sister's. Then my mother's face tightened in that nervous way she always had when she realized I was not reacting the way they expected. For a second, all I could hear was the wind pushing snow against the porch railing and the little jingling sound of the holiday wreath brushing the front door. Then the first phone buzzed. It was my sister's. She glanced down, frowned, and opened the travel app with one hand while still holding her car keys in the other. A second later, my father's phone vibrated too. Then my mother's. I watched the confusion spread across their faces before any of them even said a word. My sister's mouth fell open first. She stared at the screen, tapped it twice like the app had to be wrong, then looked up at me so fast it was almost violent. She asked me what I did. I stepped inside just enough to keep the cold air from blowing straight past them and said I canceled the resort 3 days earlier. The room went so quiet I could hear one of the kids dragging a toy across the hardwood floor in the living room. My father barked that I had no right, but I reminded him the entire ski trip had been booked on my card under my account because nobody else had enough room on theirs, and because, just like always, I was the one who handled the details when the family wanted something they could not actually afford. My sister let out this sharp little sound that was half scream and half gasp and started tapping through the reservation page. Confirmed canceled. No bluff. No mistake. No last-minute fix. My mother asked me why I would do something so cruel right before Christmas, and that was when I laughed, because hearing her call me cruel after dragging me across the country to become free childcare was almost insulting in how predictable it was. I told her the hotel deposit had already been refunded back to my account. The lift package was gone, and the flights attached to the trip had been converted into airline credits under my profile. My father actually stepped toward me then and said I had stolen from the family. I looked him dead in the eye and told him you cannot steal what you paid for in full. My sister said they were supposed to leave in the morning. I said I knew. She said the kids had been promised snow tubing and Christmas lights and that everything was planned. I told her maybe she should have planned the part where the person funding half her life was treated like a guest instead of hired help. My mother started doing what she always did when things slipped out of her control. She lowered her voice, put on that wounded expression, and said there had to be some misunderstanding, as if I had somehow accidentally canceled an entire holiday vacation while boarding planes and answering work emails. I told her there was no misunderstanding at all. I had been thinking about that trip for weeks. I had also been thinking about what would happen the moment I landed, because deep down I already knew they had not asked me to come home because they missed me. They asked me to come because they had a use for me. My father snapped that I was being dramatic. I told him no. I was finally being honest. My sister kept refreshing the app like she thought a miracle would happen if she stared hard enough. Then she whispered, "Oh my God," and looked at my mother because the airline update had just hit too. Their seats were gone. The credit was no longer attached to the family booking. It was attached to me. My father's entire face turned red. He asked when I planned this. I said around the same time I realized my holiday invitation did not include a room for me, a thank you, or even the decency to ask whether I wanted to babysit before they volunteered my time. My mother begged me to reverse it, said we could talk, said everyone was tired and stressed, and maybe things had started off badly. I stood there with melted snow soaking the hem of my coat and told her this had not started badly. It had started exactly the way it always started, with all of them assuming I would show up, smile, pay, fix, and stay quiet. My father demanded to know if I thought ruining one trip made us even. I looked at him, then at my sister clutching her phone, then at my mother already close to tears, and I said, if they thought the trip was the whole problem, they still had no idea how much of their lives had been resting on me. That was the moment I set my suitcase down and reached into the front pocket for the folder I had carried all the way from Virginia. It was thick, organized, and tabbed in the same neat way I handled campaign reports at work, because if my family had taught me anything, it was that people who live by excuses hate paper. My father rolled his eyes the second he saw it, but my sister went pale before I even opened it. She knew enough to recognize the look on my face. I pulled out the first page and held it up. Mortgage assistance. Not the full house payment every month, but enough to keep them breathing every time they fell behind. Then I set down the next page. Utility transfers. Electric. Internet. Water. Then the next. My sister's car payment support from the months after she lost her job. Then the insurance payment I had quietly kept covering because nobody wanted the kids riding around uninsured. Then the phone plan. Then the grocery delivery account that my mother loved to call a blessing from above every time the holiday food showed up on her porch, like magic. None of it was magic. It was me. Every late-night transfer. Every emergency card payment. Every quiet rescue wired out between meetings, flights, and weekends, when I should have been building my own life instead of keeping theirs from sinking. My mother looked at the papers like they were something ugly. My father kept insisting this was family and that family helps each other, but I asked him a simple question. When was the last time any of them helped me? Not with money. With anything. When was the last time they called just to see how I was doing and did not work a favor into the conversation before the call ended? My sister started to say something about how I had always offered, and I cut her off. I told her people stop saying no when they learn that saying no comes with punishment. Silence, guilt, accusations, weeks of being called selfish. I had spent years being trained to keep the peace by paying for it. My father said that was ridiculous and ungrateful. He said he put a roof over my head growing up. He said they raised me. I told him that raising your daughter does not give you a lifetime subscription to her bank account. My mother started crying then, soft at first, then harder when she realized nobody was rushing to comfort her because even the kids could feel something real was happening now. I took another paper from the folder and placed it on the entryway table. That one got everyone's attention. It was the notice showing I had canceled the automatic support transfers weeks earlier. Not that morning. Not in anger on the porch. Weeks earlier. I told them overdue notices had already started building in their portals and inboxes. If they had been checking their accounts instead of assuming things somehow got handled, they would have known. My sister whispered, "No, no, no," under her breath as she opened another app. My father demanded to know why they had not been told. I told him because I wanted the truth to do what the truth always does when people stop hiding it. I wanted it to arrive slowly and sit in the middle of their living room where nobody could look away from it. My mother asked if I was really going to let the family spiral over hurt feelings. That made something in me go cold. I looked at her and said, "This is exactly why I stopped telling you how I felt years ago, because every time I did, you shrank it into hurt feelings, as if exhaustion, resentment, and being treated like an emergency fund with a pulse were just mood swings I would get over." My father told me to stop talking like a victim. I said I was not a victim anymore. That was the point. My sister had backed herself against the wall by then, clutching her phone like it might save her. I told her the car lender had already stopped receiving backup payments from me. I told my mother the grocery account would shut off at the end of the week. I told my father the household transfers were done. Then I said the one thing that made all three of them freeze. I said I had not flown across the country just to cancel their vacation. I flew in because this was the last Christmas I would ever spend financing people who laughed at me before I had even taken my boots off. I wish I could say somebody apologized right then, but that is not how families like mine work. My father went straight to anger because anger had always been his shield. My mother went to guilt because guilt had always been hers. My sister kept crying because crying had usually been enough to make everyone rearrange reality around her. But none of it was working on me anymore. I was tired, cold, and more certain than I had ever been in my life. I told them this was not a scene. It was a boundary. And whether they liked it or not, boundaries were already expensive. My father asked me where I thought I was going to go after pulling a stunt like that, and I told him the truth. I was not going upstairs to unpack. I was not sleeping in the guest room. I was not spending one single night under a roof I had helped keep over people who could stand there laughing while handing me their responsibilities. I told them I had a closing appointment and a key pickup the next morning. My mother blinked at me and asked what I was talking about. My sister actually stopped crying long enough to stare, so I told them that while they were assuming I would keep wiring money forever, I had spent the last year building an exit quietly and carefully. I had bought a condo in Denver. My condo. My name only, my down payment, my mortgage, my furniture deliveries, my address, my future. I had not told them because I knew exactly what would happen if they knew. There would be talk about how useful it would be to have a place in the city. There would be hints about staying over. There would be emergencies and visits that lasted too long and somehow ended with one more bill in my lap. So I kept it private. My father looked offended in a way that would have been funny if it had not shaped my childhood. He asked how I could make a move that big without discussing it with family. I told him because every time I made a responsible decision for myself, this family treated it like shared property. My mother asked if I had really planned all of this before coming home. I said yes. I planned it the same way I planned everything else in my life. Because if I had left my future in their hands, I would still be paying for somebody else's chaos at 50. My sister asked where the kids were supposed to go now. I told her with their mother. That answer hit her harder than the canceled resort had. She said she needed a break. I said being a parent and wanting a break are not the same as assigning your children to an aunt who never agreed to take them. My father raised his voice and said I was selfish. I asked him what exactly was selfish about refusing to be ambushed at the front door after 6 hours of travel and thousands of dollars in support nobody thanked me for. He had no answer, so he did what men like him do when they lose control. He made it about respect. He said I was humiliating him in his own home. I almost laughed at that because the truth was, this had not even begun to touch the humiliation I had swallowed for years. Every time they called me in crisis and then dismissed me, the second the problem was solved. My mother came closer and lowered her voice, asking me to at least stay the night and talk in the morning. I could hear the panic beneath the softness now. She knew once I walked away, the family story about me being dramatic would be harder to maintain because I would no longer be there to absorb their version of events. But I was done sitting in kitchens while people explained why my pain was inconvenient. I picked up my suitcase again and told them I was leaving. My father said if I walked out after embarrassing the family like this, I should not expect to come back. I looked at him and said that was the first useful thing he had said to me all night. The cold hit me hard when I stepped back onto the porch, but I barely felt it. My heart was pounding too loudly. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name, my father swearing under his breath, my sister telling the kids to stay in the living room, but none of it sounded like home anymore. It sounded like noise from a place that had finally stopped having power over me. I wheeled my suitcase down the snowy path toward the curb where my rideshare was pulling up, warm headlights cutting through the dark. My driver popped the trunk and asked if I was okay in that casual way strangers sometimes do when they can tell they are catching the middle of something. I said yes before I even thought about it, and the second the word came out, I realized it was true. Not perfectly, not emotionally, but in the deepest way that mattered, yes. I was okay because for the first time I was leaving without the intention of coming back to rescue anyone. I was leaving because I had somewhere better to go. As the car pulled away, I looked back once and saw the front door still open. Yellow light spilling over the snow, 3 figures crowded in the frame like they were watching a train leave without them. The whole house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it always had been. Maybe I was just finally seeing it at the right distance. My condo did not look like a grand, dramatic, fresh start from the outside. It was not a mansion or a fantasy. It was a clean one-bedroom place in a secure building with good light, a quiet lobby, and a view of the city that made me feel like I had finally stepped into a life I could actually hear myself think inside. There were still boxes in the corner, 2 bar stools waiting to be assembled, and a mattress on a frame that had only arrived the week before. But the second I walked in and locked the door behind me, the silence felt richer than anything my family had ever called comfort. Nobody had a key. Nobody had a drawer here. Nobody knew how to turn my space into their overflow. I took off my coat, set my phone on the kitchen counter, and just stood there for a minute. No one yelling, no children crying in another room, no TV turned up too loud over unpaid bills and forced laughter. I made tea in a mug I had packed myself and sat on the floor because my couch had not been delivered yet. Through the window, the city glowed soft against the dark sky, and I remember thinking, this is what peace sounds like when nobody is asking you to earn it. The next morning, I woke up later than I meant to because I had slept harder than I had in months. For a few blessed seconds, I forgot what day it was. Then I saw the missed calls. 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, 1 from an unknown number that was obviously one of them using someone else's phone. I ignored all of them and started making coffee. Around 11, my phone buzzed again, but this time it was my sister, and the message was so unlike her that I read it twice. She asked if she could come by alone. She said she did not want to fight. She said she wanted to apologize. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering because my first instinct was that it had to be a setup, some emotional ambush carried in under a softer voice, but something about the wording felt stripped down and tired, not polished. I waited another 20 minutes before sending the address. When she arrived, she looked nothing like the woman who had laughed in the doorway the night before. No makeup. Hair pulled back badly. Hoodie under a winter coat. No bright energy. No smugness. Just a woman who looked like sleep, panic, and reality had all hit at once. I let her in. She stepped inside slowly, looking around like she had entered a version of me she had never bothered to imagine. I offered coffee. She nodded. We sat at the counter because the living room still looked half moved in. For a minute, she just wrapped both hands around the mug and stared down into it. Then she said she was sorry. Not in that shallow family way, where sorry means please stop making me uncomfortable. She said she was sorry for the trip, for laughing, for assuming I would do what I always did, for acting like I did not have my own life. She said when she saw the cancellation notices and then the payment folder, it hit her all at once how much of her life had been propped up by me without her ever really saying thank you. I listened without helping her through it. She told me our parents had spent years calling me dependable like it was praise, when really it was a way of assigning me every burden nobody else wanted. She admitted that after a while she stopped even seeing it because it had become the family system. I asked her the question I had wanted answered for years. If I had shown up and said no on the porch, without any of the financial leverage, would you have defended me? She did not answer right away, which was answer enough. Finally, she said no, probably not. That honesty, painful as it was, earned more respect from me than 100 fake tears ever could. She said she had taken the kids to a motel for the night because she could not stand being in that house with our father raging and our mother crying and blaming everyone but herself. She said she was looking at rentals. She said she might have to get a part-time job immediately and figure the rest out later. I told her she should. She asked if there was any way to fix things between us. I told her that depended on what she meant by fix. If she meant go back to the old arrangement where she apologized, I softened, and then nothing changed, then no. If she meant actually building a different relationship where I was treated like a person instead of the backup plan, maybe someday. She cried a little then, but quietly, like she knew none of this could be handed off to me anymore. Before she left, she looked around my kitchen one more time and said, "This place feels like you. Clean, calm, no noise." I said that was the idea. She nodded and told me she understood now why I had kept it private. When the door closed behind her, I stood there for a long minute, feeling something strange and unfamiliar. Not forgiveness, not even relief, just space. Space where expectation used to be. That night, the sun went down early and I turned on the small table lamp by the window and finally started unpacking dishes. For the first time in years, nobody interrupted me to ask for money while I was trying to build something of my own. I should have known the peace would not last untouched, but even that short stretch of quiet felt like a reward my nervous system had been begging for. The next blow came through the family group chat at 7:30 the following morning. My father had written a long message full of words like betrayal, disrespect, and humiliation, as if the real offense in all of this was not years of using me, but the fact that I had finally stopped. My mother followed with a softer version of the same script, saying families go through hard seasons and that cutting people off at Christmas was cruel and unnatural. My sister did not say anything. I read every message while standing at my kitchen counter eating toast in absolute silence, and I realized something almost funny. Without me rushing to fix things, their drama suddenly had nowhere to land. I did not answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and started doing what I should have done a long time ago. I removed every authorized user I legally could from the cards tied to my accounts. I canceled the recurring transfers I had once set up in hopeful little bursts of generosity. I updated passwords. I called the phone provider and split off the last line still attached to my name. I contacted the insurance company and made it clear I was no longer paying toward policies that were not mine. Then I called the mortgage servicer and documented that I would not be making any further support payments toward a property I did not live in and did not control. The woman on the line was calm and practical, which I appreciated. She explained exactly what could and could not happen next, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was participating in reality instead of family mythology. No, I could not wave a wand and erase my past involvement overnight. But yes, I could stop bleeding money into a system built on my silence. That distinction mattered. It made the whole thing feel less like revenge and more like surgery. Painful, overdue, and absolutely necessary. Around noon, my sister finally texted me directly. She said the lender had started calling about the car. She said Dad was blaming everyone else. She said Mom kept insisting I would calm down and resume everything after New Year's if they just gave me time. I wrote back one sentence. I am not calming down. I am done. She did not respond. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at my door, and when I checked the camera, my mother was standing in the hallway alone in a dark coat, clutching her purse with both hands. I almost did not let her in, but something in me wanted to see what truth looked like when it finally ran out of scripts. She stepped inside and immediately looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Not because I felt powerful, but because without the house, the holiday decorations, and my father's anger filling the air around her, she was just a woman who had spent too many years managing somebody else's moods and calling that survival. She did not sit down at first. She just stood by the window and said the trip was over. Obviously, the kids were upset. My sister was staying with a friend for now. My father had spent the morning calling people he had not spoken to in years, looking for loans or sympathy or both. Then she said the car could be taken if the payments were not caught up soon. The house account was behind. Everything felt unstable. I looked at her and asked whether she had come to apologize or to negotiate. That question landed hard. She looked away for a second, then reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check. It was not large enough to mean justice. It was barely large enough to count as a beginning. She said it was part of what they owed me and that more would come when they could manage it. I asked whether she understood why this happened. She said they had all become too comfortable depending on me. I said that is not the same as understanding. Comfortable sounds accidental. This was entitlement. This was years of calling me only when something broke, and then acting offended when I wanted to live like an adult with my own boundaries. My mother's eyes filled, but this time she did not use tears as a weapon. She just nodded once, like the words hurt because they were true. Still, she never actually said, I am sorry. She said we all made mistakes. There it was. The family version of accountability. Diffuse it, spread it around, make the damage sound mutual. I almost handed the check back just for that, but I kept it because sometimes the clearest response is not an argument. It is refusing to carry even one more ounce of someone else's denial. Before leaving, she asked what she was supposed to tell my father. I told her to tell him nothing. I was not interested in one more round of accusations, one more demand for gratitude, or one more speech about respect from a man who opened the front door to his daughter and treated her like hired labor. My mother stood there for a moment like she wanted to say something softer, something true, but whatever it was, it never made it past her pride. She left with a quiet take care, and when the door shut behind her, I leaned against it and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 10 years. Over the next 2 weeks, the family messages slowed, not because they accepted my boundaries, but because they were finally dealing with consequences that could not be argued into disappearing. My sister found a retail job temporarily. The schedule was messy, but it was work. The car situation remained shaky, but she was at least trying. My mother mailed a second, smaller check with no note except for my name on the envelope. My father went silent completely, which, from him, was not peace. It was wounded ego. But it was still quieter than manipulation, and by then I had learned quiet could be enough, A month later, Christmas felt different in a way I did not have words for at first. It was not grand or cinematic. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no sentimental dinner, no speech about family finding its way back to itself. It was just me in my condo with a small tree by the window, a half-finished mug of coffee on the counter, and a phone that had finally stopped buzzing every time someone in my family needed rescuing. Outside, the city looked clean and cold under winter light. Inside, everything belonged exactly where I put it. That simple fact still felt miraculous some mornings. I started noticing little things that would have sounded ridiculous to anyone who had not lived the way I had. How peaceful it felt to buy groceries without calculating who else I was actually feeding. How good it felt to answer my own door without bracing for bad news or a favor. How light my chest felt, waking up without dread already waiting for me. My sister and I were not close, but we were something more honest now. She sent short updates. Nothing dramatic. A picture of the kids coloring on the floor of a small apartment she had managed to rent. A message saying she had made it through her first week at work and was exhausted but proud of herself. Another saying she had sold some things, cut back, and was figuring it out. She did not ask me for money once. That mattered more than any apology she had given in my kitchen. My mother sent another check too, smaller than the first, but consistent. Not enough to erase what had happened. Not enough to rebuild trust. But enough to prove that for once, effort was moving in my direction instead of only demands. I still did not cash them right away. I needed time. Boundaries are not only about what you stop giving other people. They are also about what you stop forcing yourself to accept before you are ready. As for my father, there was nothing. No apology, no rage, no explanation, just silence. A month earlier, that silence would have hurt me. I would have translated it into rejection, into proof that I had pushed too far and lost my family. But distance has a way of clarifying things if you let it. His silence was not proof that I had done something wrong. It was proof that the only relationship he knew how to maintain with me was one where he stayed in control. Once that ended, so did his interest in pretending. And honestly, that understanding gave me more peace than any forced reunion could have. On Christmas Eve, I made dinner for myself, turned on soft music, and watched the lights from other buildings flicker across the glass. At one point, I started laughing quietly for no reason except that the apartment was calm, and the calm was mine. No one was about to call asking me to transfer money before morning. No one was going to guilt me into solving a problem they created and called love. No one was waiting at the end of a conversation to turn me into a tool. For years, I thought being needed meant being valued. I thought if I just loved hard enough, gave enough, fixed enough, somebody in that family would eventually look at me and see a daughter, a sister, a whole person. What I learned instead is something I wish more people were taught younger, because it would save them years of confusion and pain. Being useful is not the same as being loved. Being dependable is not the same as being respected. And sacrificing yourself without limits does not make you kind if the people around you are only growing more comfortable with your exhaustion. Real love has structure. Real care has honesty. Real family does not demand that one person drown so everyone else can stay dry. That was the lesson hidden inside everything that happened to me, and I think it matters beyond my story. There is educational value in learning where support ends and self-abandonment begins. There is valuable knowledge in understanding that boundaries are not cruelty. They are responsibility. They teach other people how to treat you, and they remind you that your life is not a public utility for anyone with the right last name. Sometimes, the most useful thing you can do for the people around you is stop protecting them from the results of their own choices. Sometimes the most compassionate decision is the one that looks harsh from the outside because it finally forces growth, truth, and accountability into a place where denial used to live. That does not mean revenge has to be loud or ugly. Sometimes the strongest revenge is refusing to keep playing the role that is destroying you. If my story means anything now, I hope it means this. You can love people and still say no. You can care deeply and still walk away from what is hurting you. You can build a life that is calm, honest, and good without apologizing for every boundary that made it possible. And if you have ever had to choose between being the safety net for everyone else and finally becoming a safe place for yourself, then you already know how hard that choice is. I would really love to hear your thoughts, because stories like this are not only about conflict, they are also about the lessons we carry forward, the self-respect we rebuild, and the kind of life we decide we deserve after the noise is finally gone.